All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I was for some reason the audio has been a little bit fuzzy coming into me. So, can you hear me? Okay.
We can, Tom. Thanks.
All right. Good. I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint if that's okay. We'll share that with you, and I'll start my presentation. And certainly good to be with you. I think I spoke with Rotary some years ago in person, but it's good to be back with you. And I'm going to talk today. What I call the changing landscape of criminal justice. And I'm doing this through a lens of the places really where I've worked through my career. And I've had a fairly unique opportunity in my career. Those are the agencies where I've held leadership positions. But I've had the opportunity to serve at the pleasure of 6 governors, and probably one of the few people in Ohio history that's had the opportunity to serve on 3 cabinets for 2 different governors of 3 different governors of 2 different parties and 2 different agencies. But I've worked at the prison system, juvenile justice, and then 8 years with Mike DeWine at BCI, and now at public safety. I'm just going to kind of walk you through some of those assignments and some of the challenges and some of the changing landscape over the years. Department of Corrections is such a challenging organization. In fact, when Mike DeWine became governor and we began talking about where I could best serve him, he said, you want to go back to corrections? And I said, I'll go anywhere but corrections. 25 years there was enough. That's why my hair is so white. And I asked to head to public safety and was pleased with this appointment. But the Department of Corrections is such a challenging organization. And my hat's off to Director Annette Chambers-Smith and her team there, particularly managing through the pandemic now. The biggest challenges I had there managing as assistant director for 14 years was just the sheer growth of the prison population. We went from about 8,000 inmates when I started right out of law school to almost 50,000 inmates by the time I left, and from 8 prisons to 34 prisons across Ohio. Just incredible growth, all the promotions and hiring and just the change and opening new prisons and building. And you can see from this timeline, I'll just quickly go through the decades, but you can see kind of how we grew with the various model penal code, sweeping mandatory sentences, the crack era of misdemeanors becoming felonies, truth in sentencing, until we hit into the 2010s and we really started, I think, taking a fresh look at our population, saying it's really kind of growing out of control. What can we do to really have a more effective management of our prison system? And so actually the population, as of the pandemic, is now closer to 45,000. It's probably the lowest it's been in 15 or 20 years. The other big challenge I had in corrections was managing the Lucasville prison riot and its aftermath. The tragic death of correction officer Robert Vallantingham and 10 inmates. And Director Reggie Wilkinson and I came out of that crisis with really 2 overarching goals. First and foremost, just really holding our system together. I had seen New York after Attica and how dysfunctional their system was. I saw New Mexico after the Santa Fe riots in the 80s. And so really our overarching goal was, let's keep our system moving forward. Let's keep doing the good things that we're doing and hold our wards together, hold our system together. The other thing we wanted to do was identify and act on lessons learned from the riot and use the terrible tragedy of Lucasville to improve our system. So enhance staffing. We were able to fund our Supermax prison in Youngstown, beef up our staff training, and really enhance our critical incident management system. The other thing that we dealt with was the implementation of capital punishment. We went from a death penalty that was then unconstitutional, then a new death penalty with electrocution or lethal injection. Something Reggie and I advocated for with several governors was doing away with Old Sparky, the electric chair. And fortunately, we passed that legislation in the 2000s, and we never had to execute anybody through the electric chair. But certainly not something that I miss. Certainly not a pleasant part of the job, and not something I wish on my colleagues at DRC. In 2004, late 2004, Governor Taft asked me to take over the Department of Youth Services, which was in crisis at the time, and very intense public criticism. I think 10% of my employees at one institution were under indictment, and the governor had just fired a friend of mine that was a director there for 17 years. And it's such a challenging organization. This was perhaps my most challenging assignment that I've had, basically because of the challenging population. You can see in this chart the kids that come into our juvenile justice system, the mental health caseloads, self-injury, drug problems, family members incarcerated. I used to look at some of my kids' files when they were getting ready to be paroled. And I think that when I'd look at mom just got out of prison, dad's a drug dealer, I would think, my gosh, the young person I'm releasing on parole is going to be the most stable family member of the group. It's just a really tough population of young people. Both Governor Taft and Governor Strickland gave me what I call a clean palette to really revamp the system. And so we set about doing that starting in early 2005. First was just stopping the abuse. I was really quite stunned coming from the adult prison system to see the way the youth were treated, both verbally and physically. And so my first goal was to clean up the institutions and hopefully allow the youth and the staff to feel safe. And so we tried to implement we were very good at implementing the stick part when I came in. I tried to add the carrot to that and really go to a carrot and stick approach with our young people. Again, with our primary goals being safer facilities with good programming and better placement of youth, more effective placement of our youth, because not all these kids needed to really come to our state, our very kind of penal state system. And so I did a lot of work with Dr. Ed Latessa at the University of Cincinnati, developing risk assessment instruments and adding behavioral programs in our communities. And so we were able to take the population down from about 1,900 to now well under 400, consistent, in my opinion, with good public safety. So closed a number of facilities along the way. When Mike DeWine became Attorney General, we met actually at an OSU tailgate party right after his election. Alcohol was not involved, but Mike asked me if I'd be interested in BCI, superintendent at BCI. And BCI was a central part of his campaign for Attorney General. The office had been impacted by a lot of turnover, a lot of transitions. In fact, the Attorney General's office, I think, had maybe 5 attorneys general in 5 years, something like that. We wanted to bring some stability to certainly the Office of Attorney General, but also to BCI. And so Mike asked me to lead his charge, really in large part of addressing the timely processing of evidence in our crime lab. And AG DeWine and I shared really a fairly straightforward mission. Let's make BCI the best crime lab and best investigative agency in the country. And we had a lot of highlights over the course of our 8 years there. But what I consider some of the highlights are the testing the old rape kits. You've obviously all read about that, the 14,000 old rape kits. But we did that at the same time. We were able to decrease our DNA turnaround time for our prosecutors and law enforcement from 125 days to 22 days. And we're very proud of that. And then toward the end of our time there, of course, the Pike County murders, the biggest crime case in the history of Ohio. And I think when that case is the dust settles and hopefully successful prosecutions in that case, I think what we'll see as much as anything is the important role of our intelligence analysts in solving very complex criminal cases. The work that our intelligence analysts did at BCI was nothing short of phenomenal. And I think someday that entire story will hopefully be told. So now, as I said, after Mike DeWine was elected governor, he appointed me director of public safety. And so you see on the screen our divisions here at public safety: motor BMV, everybody's favorite place; EMA, emergency management; emergency medical services, which is our paramedics across the state; Homeland Security; criminal justice services; and of course the State Highway Patrol. We're a big organization in state government. I think we're probably the 3rd largest agency employee-wise. But we're also thinking big, and the governor has really challenged us and challenged me to think big. One of the first things I focused on was the Highway Patrol and just looking at beefing up our training, our education requirements within the patrol, as well as our diversity and inclusion within the patrol. I was very proud a little over a year ago to stand with Governor DeWine when we appointed the first ever African-American colonel of the Highway Patrol, Colonel Fambro, and Lieutenant Colonel Marla Gaskell, the first ever female lieutenant colonel, both career professionals who are just doing a fabulous job. One of our big initiatives is youthful driver safety, very near and dear to the governor's heart, and something that he has challenged us to really focus on through a comprehensive approach to improving youthful driver safety. In the BMV, working very close with John Houston, Lieutenant Governor, with a real focus on customer service. And we started right away and implemented last June, a year ago, the piloting of a new system, what we call Get in Line Online. Perhaps some of you have used it. Very good system. It's kind of like the Disney Fast Pass, where you get online, in line, you have 4 hours to come to a BMV. You can even pick which BMV has the shortest wait times. You can get online and see that. So we're really focusing on, on improved customer service with BMV. And that was something that Mike Rankin, of course, that was our registrar for a number of years, and Mike's really started that path toward that. I need to give Mike credit for that, because he was really a pioneer in many ways with BMV and the focus on quicker turnaround. So thank you, Mike, for that. And this online inline is so popular now. You can see we've taken it statewide this year. Another big initiative of Governor DeWine is obviously is what we call Recovery Ohio, dealing with the terrible drug problem in Ohio and across the country, focusing again on in a holistic way of prevention, treatment, education, and interdiction. And of course, my focus at public safety has been more on the interdiction side. And so a year ago, we kicked off a new narcotics intelligence center here at our building at public safety, focusing on drug task forces that work, focusing on dark web investigations, cryptocurrency, data analytics among our 900 some law enforcement agencies across Ohio, and cyber forensic analysis. And I talk about the dark web, and people often ask me about the dark web. Usually they ask me how to get to the dark web, and it's not something you get into accidentally. I've got just this illustration, I think, helped me understand better, just in a broad view, what the dark web is. You see the surface web that most of us are familiar with when we Google or Bing or get into Wikipedia and the like. Then you see the deep web that's used for business purposes, academic purposes, military purposes, etc. And then the dark web that you don't get into accidentally. That's where the criminals roam. In the dark web, that's where your human trafficking, your drug trafficking take place. And you can see why. Look at the dark web. You can get into the dark web, just like going shopping, just like Amazon. You can buy all these different types of cocaine, fentanyl, have it delivered right to your door. And again, the choice is cryptocurrency. And what is cryptocurrency? You can see on the slide kind of what it is. And most people are familiar with Bitcoin. That's probably the predominant type of cryptocurrency. But as this slide shows, there are just numerous types of cryptocurrency that we have to keep up with. Another initiative is our Ohio School Safety Center. And we're really promoting the use of this tip line for the Safety Center. We're getting some amazing tips in from students, from parents, and others. We're scanning social media, not looking for individual names of kids, but just scanning for those threats to our schools, trying to prevent before the actual threat occurs. We're reviewing emergency plans of our schools across Ohio and implementing threat assessment training for our teachers and staff. Really trying to consolidate school safety in a one-stop shop here at Public Safety. We had hoped to hold our first annual School Safety Summit in June, but that's been obviously delayed because of the pandemic. Speaking of the pandemic, this is a shot of our Emergency Operations Center. Most people probably haven't seen this or been to this site, but this is really the nerve center for handling all sorts of crises, including the pandemic. This is kind of what we call the war room. And this was taken a month or so ago. Off to the right of this room is the lead agency room where Dr. Acton and her team worked through much of the pandemic. Next to that is the executive room where I spent some time, as well as a lot of senior members of the governor's staff managing through COVID-19. So the other thing the governor did, other than activating the State Emergency Operations Center, and I thought this was a really very effective tool, is he created a number of what he called strike forces. And you can see them on the screen. I headed up and still head up the public safety strike force. And so what that means is for 2 months or so, every weekday morning at 9 o'clock, I hosted and moderated a phone call with all of our public safety partners across Ohio, Sheriff's Association, Chiefs of Police, prosecutors, BCI, Attorney General's Office, State Patrol, EMA, and the Governor's Office and National Guard. Then also each week we touch base with our fire chiefs and our EMS providers, touch base with FOP to make sure we're staying in touch with our line police officers, and then once a week talking with the director of the the Health Commissioners Association. So through these meetings, we were able to problem solve. We were able to address questions from our local partners and get those to the governor's office or to the director of health, to Amy or others. It was just a very effective tool of managing the public safety aspect of the pandemic. And of course, next was the protest, and we've been very involved with the protest. This is a slide from when I was downtown early in the protest with Colonel Fambrough, Lieutenant Colonel Tieford, spending some time with the protesters. You know, and it seems like whenever we let our guard down a little bit, which we're not doing, we would have this kind of an episode either at the Supreme Court or at the State House. And so we're bound and determined not to let that happen again. And so I have a pretty heavy workforce at the State House. And even yesterday, this is a slide, excuse me, from Saturday, where we had, again, large crowds. We had, it got a little bit dicey, actually. The Columbus Police, I thought, handled it well. The State Patrol handled it well. But we had the Proud Boys, we had Bike Trump, Black Lives Matter, Ohio Patriots, a lot of skirmishes breaking out. It could have really gotten out of hand, but I think it was handled very well. But this is still going on as recently as Saturday. I think the good news from the post George Floyd tragedy is law enforcement reform and things that people like myself and others, I think, have really wished for some time, and I think now have the appetite within the legislature and elsewhere to actually implement some of this reform. So we're looking at some pretty significant pieces, such as the creation of a law enforcement oversight and accountability board, kind of like a healthcare board or nursing board or dental board. Also, neutral objective investigations and prosecutions on cases of deadly force. So no longer, if the legislature passes this, no longer will an agency be able to investigate or prosecute their own deadly force cases. So we think these are two very huge additions to our law enforcement reform package. And finally, looking through the lens that I look at, I just end by saying I think all of this, for me, means opportunity. So we certainly have a crisis time now with what's going on in our country and in Ohio, but I think ultimately we have a lot of opportunities for the future. I think we have, I think we'll see better training within a criminal justice system, better education, better diversity, better technology, better communication, better data, better research, and better transparency for what I hope is a better criminal justice system. So appreciate your attention. Sorry, my voice is getting a little bit scratchy here, but I appreciate your attention and the opportunity to share some thoughts with you this afternoon. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom, for that excellent presentation.
I see the question, how are the budget cuts impacting DPS? So we took a round of budget cuts at the end of this past fiscal year that we were mostly able to handle through some delayed grants and through some staff vacancies. But I'm very concerned about the budget moving forward, as I'm sure all of us are, state and local government and private sector. So we are awaiting our budget numbers from the Office of Budget Management, and we're prepared to take steps. I was able to cut several tens of millions of dollars out of my last biennium budget, primarily through some management, through some delays of purchases and equipment and that type of thing. But we're very concerned moving forward. I'm still operating off of 2003 registration fees, for instance, for the Highway Patrol and Bureau of Motor Vehicles. So we're going to have to address that issue at some point in time. My goal is to keep the Highway Patrol as close to 1,600 sworn troopers as I can, and to continue our level of service at BMV. But we're very nervous about the budget moving forward.
Very good.
And Mike Rankin reminds us that our fees are some of the lowest in the United States. So Mike, please pass that on to the legislature. Public officials in Washington and Ohio who don't seem to be on board with some of the law enforcement reform you laid out. Well, and I think, well, I'd like to be on the same page with Washington or have them be on the same page with us. I think we can still move forward in Ohio. Most law enforcement is local based and state and local based. And so I think with our reform packages that I had the screenshot on, I think it will bring some really meaningful reform to Ohio. Obviously, we need the support of the Ohio legislature in some of those areas. such as the board that I'm talking about, the credentialing type board. But I think with the kind of things, I've already started some of the pieces. In fact, I already started a new office of recruitment right here at Public Safety to provide technical assistance to our local law enforcement partners. So I think most of this we can do in state. We'd like to have whatever funding is available federally, and certainly like it to be part of a national reform effort. But I think we can make some meaningful impact right here in Ohio.
Your earlier question had to do with Portland and what's going on out there and what your take is on it.
Did you hear that, Director?
Sorry, I
So
still
the
didn't get
question
audio.
was your feelings about what's happening in Portland and how do we avoid that?
If someone could type that out real fast.
I'm trying.
There.
All right, anybody else that has questions, please just type them into the chat.
Oh yeah, quite about what's happening in Portland and how we can avoid that. Well, you know, that's a very difficult question. I mean, I was nervous Saturday, as I mentioned, and was briefing the governor throughout the day on the events in downtown Columbus, and we certainly hope not to become another Portland. We had enough trouble there, with that round 6 or 8 weeks ago. So I think in part it's that we keep talking with each other, that we listen, that law enforcement handle it well. One of the things that we're doing is developing a new statewide standard on how to deal with civil unrest that I think we can work with law enforcement. I think most of the reforms that we've been talking about that I laid out earlier on the screen have support of our law enforcement partners, as well as groups around Ohio like the NAACP, and hopefully we'll have support of the legislature. So I think we need some meaningful reform. I think we need to continue to communicate. We obviously need to have I need to continue a presence in downtown Columbus with Columbus Police. That's been the focal point of most of at least the destruction in Ohio and some of the vandalism. So I think it's a combination of things to avoid what's happening in Portland. It's not an easy answer.
All right, we have time for one more question. Anybody wants to put one in? Can you see that question, Director?
I see the comment. I'm not sure if that's a question or a comment. I'll take that as a comment. Let's not have anonymous federal military grabbing up people and taking them away to who knows where. And I don't think we've talked about doing that in Ohio. Counter protest Saturday. Yeah, as I mentioned, Saturday was an unusual event. We had those 4 groups I had on the screen. So we had, and we did have some skirmish. We actually had a skirmish line for a while between some of the Black Lives Matter group and the, I don't know if it was the Bikers for Trump or the other, or the Patriot group. And we broke up some fights, and I have to say I was a little bit nervous about the day, but I think, again, cooler has prevailed. I think law enforcement did a nice job of dealing with the situation. And that's the kind of thing we need to continue to do.
So you have one more question there from Manana about how dealing with stress with all the hats you have to wear.
Yeah, well, I don't know how I'm dealing with stress. You probably need to ask my wife, but it has been, I'll have to admit, it's been, first of all, working with Mike DeWine. Mike's high energy, and I've worked around him and with him and known him for a long time. He's just full bore energy and expects that with all of us. I mean, he was emailing me Saturday morning early. He was emailing me yesterday, I think about 6:30 in the morning. And so there's always, that part we bargained for. I bargained for that because I've worked with and for Mike DeWine for a long time. I'll have to say that the pandemic and now the protest and some of the riot type stuff and everything else, it has been a nonstop, not just for me, but certainly for the governor's staff and for many of the cabinet members, if not all the cabinet members. So it has been, and we're aware of that. We talk about that amongst the cabinet, that we need to make sure we know that we're in this for a while, and we need to take care of ourselves, like all of you do as well in your days. So thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Director. We really appreciate you being here today with us, sharing some of your background experiences, and continue to do good work, and we wish you the best. I really want to thank you for joining us today. Great speaker, very interesting topic. I'm not sure, like he's saying, how Tom deals with all the stress and all the hats he has to wear, but please spread the word and let other members, friends know. Join us on Zoom next week. We'll have Christy Angel, President and CEO of the YWCA. We are adjourned.